That was bracing. They don't like it when you shoot at them. I'll work that out myself.
Did you find Vitelli?
Vitelli's out of it. Bumblebee laid down arms, the first sign of inevitable crushing defeat. Can you imagine such a cowardly creature?
Firefly, or The Space Cowboy Show. You've most likely heard some interesting, even contradictory things about it. My friend told me it was her favorite show, and that I shouldn't watch it. Years later, after asking many other fans, I can say that not only was my introduction not unusual, it was fairly common. And somehow this is just the beginning of the strangeness. But before we begin to grapple with the show's bizarre reputation and the reason this introduction is so common, let's start by looking at the show proper. Firefly is a show about time. It begins with a bang, it gallops along like a hero, and then, out of nowhere, it ends. But it doesn't waste a minute of the time it's been given. See, I'm not sure when you're watching this, but one of the most surprising aspects of living now for me in the year 2039 is my strange new relationship with time. At the moment, we're all stuck inside waiting until it's safe to leave our bunkers, and despite running low on every other resource from food to general patience, the one thing I think we have too much of is time. Which means you can write your book, or play Dark Souls, or make those internet videos you wanted to make when you were younger, back when YouTube was a huge deal. And you can finally watch all those gritty shows you've been meaning to get around to, or in my case, attempting to, and instead rewatching Joss Whedon's Firefly. And I finally figured out why I keep doing that. See, Firefly is an obscure space western that was cancelled after one season. Kind of. Not really. We'll come back to that. It combines genre conventions of the late... You know what? No. Firefly is about cowboys in space, okay? I need you to understand that. It's about cowboys having adventures in space.
I honestly don't know why we're not all doing backflips right now.
The premise is goofy fun and the show revels in it.
Psychic, though? That sounds like something out of science fiction.
You live in a spaceship, dear.
So?
It has shootouts and waltzes, it has old-timey guns, and space lasers. It has adorable moments and genuine terrors. It really is one of those rare creations that feels like it has a little something for everyone. Well, on a scale of 1 to The Princess Bride, I give it a something for everything rating of about 8. It has some points removed, maybe don't watch it with your parents. And similar to the dialogue of Aaron Sorkin, it has a distinct rhythm and sarcasm that can repel people.
That young man's very brave.
Yeah, he's my hero.
If you have not seen Firefly, I recommend it, and I made this video so I can explain why the show is so passionately beloved. And if you have seen it, that's even better. I made this because I can't find discussions online that explore how well crafted the character work, world building, and themes of the show are, so I went ahead and made it. Firefly has a more uniquely positive outlook than most reviewers care to explain, and darker political and historical connotations than people will explore or even admit. I'll be discussing character and world-building stuff that's much better discovered on the show's terms, but I'll avoid unnecessary spoilers where I can, and if you haven't seen it, the best-case scenario is that you'll pause this video when you've been convinced and go watch it yourself. The sooner the better. With that being said, let's look at the first sentence I used. Firefly is an obscure space western that only had one. I don't like this sentence. Like most descriptors of Firefly, it has a loose relationship with the truth, so let's fix it. First, Firefly isn't really an obscure show anymore. It used to be. It really was a cult classic for a few years there, but it's been nearly 4 decades. At a certain point, us dorks who enjoy finding hidden gems need to take a second and notice how many of us are here in the same room. Nowadays, if you mention the word Firefly in a bunker full of 8 nerds, at least one of them will begin to vibrate. 2, if I snuck in. That's mostly due to its quality and appeal, but it also owes a lot to being perhaps the most famous canceled too soon show of all time. Even today, when there's a show that looks like it might be cancelled, there's always a comment somewhere about it being the next Firefly. This naturally advertises the show in a peculiar way. Other than that, Firefly is famous for a boatload of reasons. It was an early project of director Joss Whedon of Mickey Mouse's Avengers. You see jokes about its cancellation across a lot of places.
Me and Abed have an agreement. If one of us dies, we stage it to look like a suicide caused by the unjust cancellation of Firefly. We're gonna get that show back on the air, buddy.
Also, NASA made this. Heck, we took the DVDs into space. I'm not sure at what point we admit that it's at least found an audience, but I think we passed it a while ago. Certainly it took a while, but it's more recognized now than a lot of the most viewed shows of its era. Like, when was the last time you heard someone talk about, the football show? Is it the Ted Lasso thing? Second, let's look at the other descriptive space western. This is mostly true. It fits that genre, being a romanticized construction of a lawless frontier where everything seems up for grabs. Cowboy Bebop is a space western. The Mandalorian is a space western. But because the frontier is just a starting point for Firefly's world building, a more precise description of what Firefly is doing is post-American Civil War in space. It's an interesting subspecies of the Western. It's got pseudo-Civil War garb after a brutal conflict between a failed revolutionary conglomerate and a unifying superior force. And this past war isn't just some cute background lore, it's a central element of Firefly stories. It matters a lot to these characters. And finally, Firefly didn't get one season. because there is no season finale of Firefly. It was abruptly cancelled midway through filming the first season and ended at 14 episodes. And wouldn't you believe it, the guys over at marketing said that complete tests better than half a season. A finished season 1 would have had more episodes, so it's half a season. In total, there are 14 44-minute episodes of Firefly, and a conclusive film, which is a decent amount of time to spend with these characters. This isn't some tragic, incomplete pilot episode. No matter what complaints you hear from us fans, don't listen to us. Heck, ABC gave Max Headroom exactly the same amount of screen time, 14 44-minute episodes, and they described that as 2 seasons, despite the fact that in all those episodes, nothing really happens. Firefly is filled with game-changing things happening every episode, which goes to show that one season is not a standard unit of measurement, mathematically or narratively. The show doesn't waste any of the time it has been given. These episodes are a genuine odyssey of adventures. Fan complaints of its brevity are mostly a result of the show's unrealized potential. Alright, I feel better about that sentence now. We did it. We saved the sentence. But now that we've got some of the misconceptions out of the way, we get to look at the show now. Firefly follows the adventures of 9 characters on a spaceship as they go about surviving on the outskirts of the law. The captain, Malcolm Reynolds, and his first mate Zoe are both veterans of a recent civil war. They are quite bummed about it, no matter what they claim.
Sergeant. It's not Sergeant. Not anymore. War's over.
For some, the war will never be over.
The ship they fly, the titular Firefly-class vessel, is their opportunity for freedom from their past. As they travel, they pick up several other scrappy characters to fly with them. They have a gifted mechanic, a pilot, a giant muscle of a man who is good at rough work, and Alright, I need to choose my words carefully here. She's a companion, which is a sex worker who is heavily unionized and also a high-ranking member of society. So despite the historical implications of the old-timey overalls and guns, in this world she's actually the most immediately respectable member of the crew in the eyes of space society. Anyway, the first episode of Firefly has them gaining 3 new members of their ship. A mysterious Christian priest, a doctor on the run, and a savant younger sister who seems to be enormously important to the space government and has just been given superpowers. It's not entirely clear what these sci-fi superpowers are, but you get hints as the show goes on.
Girl is a witch. Yeah, but she's our witch.
So now they're all aboard this ship, doing crime and avoiding the steadily expanding space government. It's simple, it's to the point, it's great. And it immediately lends itself to episodic storytelling. Here they are on this planet, here they are on another. And while it can immediately be appreciated by anyone looking to see cowboys in space, the central strength of Firefly is, above all else, its spectacular emphasis on character. In a way that I think, honestly, Firefly is a gold standard for character group dynamics. Firefly has 9 central characters, and all of them are interesting. As separate entities, you have a real medley of personality here, from the atheist to the pious, the aggressive to the pacifistic, the brutal to the utterly helpless.
You okay?
I think I've been kidnapped.
Yeah.
There's always a character for you to relate to. I use the term separate entities because if you look at these characters like separate toys inside the show package, you miss out on the most interesting part, the relationships between them. Because Firefly is not a list of 9 characters, it's a web. This show is my go-to example of using a cluster of people interacting to make more than the sum of its parts. So instead of looking at the characters individually, let's look at the space between them.
Knowing me, knowing you.
Now, let's get the word character all sorted out so it makes sense when I praise the crew of Firefly. Because while there is no chance of my being refuted, there is a chance of my being misunderstood. Yeah, I'm totally joking, but that is an actual Kant quote, and it's the most arrogant thing I've read in my life. Anyway, when I hear the term good character in film reviews, and even just talking with friends, I always feel like a literal translation for what I'm hearing is, I would enjoy talking to this character for a while. The word sounds like it's used to judge a character's likability in a very static way, that almost feels like the character's purpose is to entertain the viewer personally. I want to emphasize here that it really isn't. The purpose of a character is to support the story around them. I mean, sure, you can appreciate a character for their likability or complex inner turmoil or whatever, but at the end of the day, these puppets gotta mean something and support a story. I don't need to love you, I don't even need to understand you, but your story's conveying things to me and you gotta help tickety-talk. Now, to be fair, this likability watermark, this question of would this character make an interesting dinner guest, is a serviceable test. It certainly weeds out weak characters. I personally feel like there would be a lot of silence if I had to have dinner with anyone here? But strong characters aren't isolated performances, they are pieces of a puzzle. And I can actually prove this with science. William, I defend narrative arguments, science. All Shakespearean characters are good, and it isn't because I want to have dinner with them. I don't even like the Friar, for example, the priest character in Romeo and Juliet. Remember, you actually got cast as him in the school play, even though you wanted to kiss someone on stage, and you thought this was just a forgettable background character, but you were wrong, because this character is incredibly important. The Friar can be read in a lot of different ways. If you're an actor, you have a lot of different strategies for performing these lines. Maybe you read him as the well-intentioned friend of Romeo. Fine. Or you could lean into how exasperated he is by this idiot. You were in love with Rosalind yesterday, and you want to get married today? What is wrong with you?
Hey, I've known Romeo since he's a kid. You could do a lot better. Listen to me. You could do a lot better.
Or you could be a holy agent of understanding, just the nicest father figure in the world. Or maybe he isn't exasperated, and he thinks all this is perfectly fine. Nothing's wrong. This marriage will work. Juliet's safe. Just a moron. Or what if he knows this can't possibly work because Juliet and Romeo are children and the families despise each other? So he's sacrificing these two for the people of Verona. Evil priest. Of course, if you've read the text, at least one of these interpretations probably reads as a gross perversion of the character. That's fine, the last one probably is. If you think your interpretation is so special, though, defend it.
What, fight me, bully?
But to do that, you inevitably have to explain how you understand Romeo and the conflict of the families, this marriage, this plan, Verona, love, and oh my gosh, look, we've been tricked. This puffed up popinjay tricked us into grappling with the deepest themes of the play, and now you're thinking about your parents' divorce, and all you wanted was to find out if you should read the Friar with a funny voice. This one character helps the entire play, and every character in Shakespeare is like this. My point isn't that they're unlikable, though they sometimes are, or complex, though they are, but that their actions complicate and illustrate the larger themes of their respective stories. Shakespeare isn't prioritizing whether I like the Friar. He's prioritizing the larger play and making the Friar a conduit for larger themes. The sum has to be larger than the parts, the story is more important than likability. And you know who else isn't likable and helps the larger story? Jayne! Jayne sucks. But I enjoy Jayne as a character more with every rewatch. He's not empathetic to me, but he adds so much to the story. He is such a bully, and he's gross. Not Hollywood, my hands are dirty too gross, but like, actually gross. He is immoral and self-interested and just so wonderfully dumb and unaware of his stupidity. Notice how he carries himself like he's the big brain genius of the crew. If you remove Jayne, the whole crew would start to feel a lot less like space pirates. By having him always there suggesting that they just take the money and run now, we remember that these are ruffians, and he allows the group members to discuss their morality. If you remove Jayne from the team, I promise you that Malcolm wouldn't be forced to demonstrate his moral fiber just to keep this ape in check.
You turn on any of my crew, you turn on me!
Also, I cannot praise Adam Baldwin's performance as Jayne enough here. He's hilarious. But alright, I admitted earlier that likability is a serviceable watermark, so if you want to judge Firefly characters by how they are to talk with one-on-one, they totally pass that test. And you know what? Happy birthday! There is a scene in which each character is interrogated individually by the villains. They are vibrant and alive and everything you'd want in a writing exercise demonstrating strong characters. But I want to make it clear that even in this setting, this peculiar, rare case in which you have them ask the same questions, most of the humor in the scene is derived from these quick jump cuts between them, showing how different they are from each other.
Is there any particular reason you don't wish to discuss your marriage?
We're very private people.
The legs. Oh, yeah, I definitely have to say it was her legs. You can put that down.
Let's look again at this diagram I made, and I'm sure no one will find things they disagree with. You've got paternal care, and romance, and competition, and sibling caretaking. It's great. This web is actually a better character model for me than any list of attributes I could assign to the people here. What, you want me to describe the ship doctor, Simon, as caring, awkward, clever, ripped?
What is this, amateur hour?
No, to explain Simon, I need to tell you that he gave up everything, his money, his career, his home, to take care of his sister, River. I don't think of Simon as a good doctor. I think of him as a good brother, in a way that I just hadn't seen in a show before. River's mind works differently than others. Some manifestations of this may seem similar to others in our world, but the show is pretty upfront that this is someone who has had futuristic sci-fi surgery in our brain for sci-fi reasons. I'm not the right person to ask how much of River's condition overlaps with other real-world brains, but in terms of the space between these two people, the reality of what this relationship is quite recognizable to someone who may have had to take care of a family member. For whatever missteps this show might make, and perhaps I'm missing many I wouldn't know, this is the first time I'd ever seen the quiet heroism of what it means for someone to take care of a family member who is mentally in a much different place than those around them. When I think about Simon, and when I think about River, I remember that the show was willing to have the final scene in one of the most bombastic, over-the-top heist episodes I've ever seen be a quiet moment in which Simon finds a new medication for River. This new drug may help her live comfortably without the nightmares that have been causing her distress. It's not a sure thing, and it's certainly not described as a cure, but it's possible progress for someone that deserves care. It's gentle and beautiful, and it demonstrates a surprising amount of empathy I didn't expect in my show about space cowboys. My point is that Simon's character isn't bestowed upon him by many other characters describing him over and over again. It's determined by his actions. And for a show primarily famous for being too short, it's baffling to me that there are more character decisions and unique relationships packed into these episodes than most multi-season telecasts.
So, you there, see what relationship you personally relate to, and which side of it you empathize with. Have you ever had a crush on someone, particularly someone who seems to have grown up in a higher social standing than you? Then you'll immediately relate to Kaylee. Are you in a relationship and where your spouse will never be ready to have children with you? Try Zoe. Have you been bullied? Try Simon. Does everyone think you suck? Try Jayne!
A lot of times relating to characters isn't just, hey, I like dancing too, it's recognizing yourself on either side of a dynamic. Consider the show's captain, Malcolm Reynolds. He's known Zoe, his first mate, the longest. They fought together in the war. The strength and trust of this bond has an interesting result. It actually creates conflict with the ship's pilot Wash, Zoe's husband, over their lives under Malcolm's leadership. See, Wash is a good pilot and likes being in control. He dislikes not being in control. So naturally, he dislikes that the captain has final say in every waking hour of the time Zoe and Wash have together. But see, that's just the surface of one relationship. Malcolm is also passive-aggressive with Priest due to his loss of faith in the war, active-aggressive with Jayne due to his insistence on moral principle over immediate gain, landlord and weary guide to Simon.
And at his most paternal and caring towards Kaylee, our favorite ship mechanic, because how can you not love Kaylee? She is unrelentingly positive no matter how terrible things seem.
And despite a poorly hidden crush, he has a lot of conflict with Nara, who is in many ways his opposite. He doesn't like corporate groups, she is in union. He fought for the brown coats, she opposed them. He's an atheist, she's a Buddhist. He was a punk,
She did ballet.
These are, of course, oversimplified, and nearly every one of these can be expanded upon, but it begins to show how complicated this all is. And that's just one of the 9 characters. The more I expand on each of these, the more I have to explain the characters on either side of these lines and the fabric of the show's themes.
Like William Science does.
This is efficient storytelling. You establish a relationship, you have immediate drama, and you get a whole new light on both sides of these lines. Now let's forget character arcs and development for a moment and focus on character, like it's a static entity. By lighting a face from different angles and colors, you can entirely change what it looks like. It's somehow still the same face, but we accentuate different parts of it. It's useful to think of the relationships in the same way. More relationships, more light, more face. If you only ever have your character interact with one person in a specific relationship, you only have one light illuminating it. This usually presents one-dimensional characters. Now, some characters are perfectly fine with one light. I don't need to see Christopher Nolan's Joker in any other way. He treats everyone the same and everyone treats him the same.
He's a mysterious agent of chaos, and an effective foil against a famous business owner with a secret identity.
But for most cases, you want more than one light. You want to see a diversity of relationships.
Malcolm Reynolds has 8 other lights shining on him, showing his different angles, from his command of brutal leadership when necessary to a surprising playfulness.
What the hell's going on in the engine room? Were there monkeys? Some terrifying space monkeys maybe got loose?
Now, for fun, take out your pad and quill and consider your favorite characters. Be honest with yourself and start drawing connections to the people they interact with. Go ahead, go nuts. Here, because I can't hear you, I'll go first, and you can go later, I guess, if you want to. I mean, you don't have... Breaking Bad's Walter White is a strong character because we see so many different sides of him. How does he interact with his former student Jesse? How about his son?
His wife.
How does he treat Gus Fring? How about his brother-in-law, a DEA agent hot on his trail? Putting aside how much these relations change over the seasons, each of these people see a surprisingly different Walter. Walter White cannot be understood entirely just by seeing one of these alone, even though they each may have a separate truth about him. It's only with a healthy collection of lighting that you see something true about Walter White, no matter what he claims to be to different people. Think of your favorite characters, and I think you'd be surprised that you can learn just as much seeing them talk to strangers as to their closest family. Of course, situations can draw out different aspects of characters, and I could talk a while about my theory that good world building allows an environment to be a character, but that's not important right now. Let's keep it simple. Now, given these successful examples I've been talking about, I bet I know what you're thinking. And it disgusts me. You're probably thinking that all this sounds easy, aren't you? That all you need to do is have a large number of characters talk to each other, and these relationships will just pop out of the ground naturally, right?
No.
Nowadays, most workplace comedies have this baseline default they settle into after their first season or two, where every relationship boils down to irritated coworker. The show Archer has a lot of positives, but after the first few episodes promising some relationships, and certainly by the time it reaches Firefly's 11-hour mark, all of the cast relationships have become flat. They are all now just irritated coworkers. None of these characters really care for one another at this point. They don't meaningfully interact, and I'm pretty sure they would give each other up in a second. Oh wait, I'm a genius. That actually happens. They all sell each other out to the FBI. Season 5, Episode 1. Archer himself frustrates and irritates basically everyone around him. It's the same relationship through many people. Really, think about how many comedies have people that aren't exactly friends, they're just kind of indifferent peers.
Why do we even hang out with him anyway? Hello? I've been saying this for years.
I'm not saying it's not funny, I'm just saying narratively it's kind of boring. Now, just because you prefer big budget dramas doesn't mean you're safe. Dramas actually can't help doing this either. But instead of constant comedic irritation, it relies on constant power imbalance. I rewatched the first season of House of Cards, and I cannot stress enough that nearly every scene is two people speaking and trying to shift the power balance between them or others. It might feel different at times with different subjects, settings, intimidation, and betrayal, but it's nearly always the same relationship. I don't think this is necessarily lazy writing. I understand why why they're doing this. They are portraying a cruel political landscape where these ruthless monsters can outmaneuver everyone to amass more and more power. But I don't think it's my fault when turning on these old episodes and thinking to myself, why do I feel like watching Firefly right now? It's because House of Cards, Archer, a lot of other dramas and comedies suffer from what I'm going to coin as relationship malnutrition. Cameron Barley, 2039. There are wonderful exceptions to this in both shows. I really like Peter Russo meeting with his mother for 2 short scenes. It both explains an enormous amount about his character and made this later moment when he mirrors her hit like a rock. But individual exceptions aren't enough to carry me through several seasons. I need more of these.
But whatever they did, it wasn't enough!
I just wish more shows were built around interesting relationships rather than a collection of zany characters. And to be clear, I'm not telling you not to like things just because they don't have this particular thing. I just am trying to show how unusual Firefly is. Whenever I consider interesting, diverse character relationships, I always go back to these 9 characters having adventures in space. Because sure, Zoe is a stoic killer, but her husband and the preacher bring out her softer side. She's come a long way since the war.
Zoe got married.
Yeah.
Yeah, next you'll be telling me she smiles. Has emotions.
And Jayne is a bullying mountain of a man who pushes everyone around, but even he's protective of Kaylee, because of course he is. She sees the best in everyone.
And there's so many other examples, it's difficult to really capture the character work happening in every scene. Nearly every line is doing 2 or 3 different things, and if it's not world building or narrative, its first priority is always expressing the space between these people.
Here's a fantastic benefit of all this work. In basically every story we've ever heard, there's going to be a moment where the characters know something that we, the audience, don't. They live in the story, we're just visiting. It's up to the storytellers to come up with an excuse for us to figure things out, whether visually or whatever your medium does best. And usually, a character just has to say what's going on out loud so that we, the audience, can hear it. Now, exposition is an example of this, but that's just a part of what I'm describing. Wizards just need to tell Harry Potter what's going on because
we sure as heck don't know. You can't apparate in the castle grounds, Harry. If you'd read Hogwarts: A History once, you'd know this. So how do we do this? Well, when done best, it makes sense with a character. Aang's been a popsicle for 100 years. He needs the others to explain what the heck happened to the world while he was gone. At worst, I'm suddenly realizing that it doesn't make sense for Dr. Manhattan to explain to, of all people, his girlfriend how his future vision works. Sally, you've been living with this man for 20 years. How do you not know this? The thing I adore about Firefly is that every time a character has to explain something to another, it makes perfect sense. Always. Heck, it's actually interesting why they're asking, because every crew member has areas of expertise and areas that they are totally clueless about. Simon knows medicine, and because he was a sheltered medical prodigy, he therefore knows nothing about how life works in the rough and tumble world he's entering.
Can I see a menu?
What?
Meanwhile, Kaylee is an expert mechanic. When things go wrong on the ship, and oh boy do they, she's in charge. But she doesn't know the first thing about high-class balls and galas, which is a problem when they need to blend in for a prospective client. Inara knows balls and galas and fencing, a high-class dueling system, which Malcolm needs to learn, and so on forever. I could do this with every character, and it even has fun little extras. Shepard seems innocent, but why does he have such shady information memorized?
One day you're gonna tell us all how a preacher knows so damn much about crime.
It would have been so easy to make a crew member designated Dumbo Mick asks too many questions.
Mia Mia? What's Mia Mia?
But no, in Firefly, every character gets their turn to pass the flow of information. In this show, even the simple act of letting the audience know what the heck is going on helps to demonstrate who these characters are. This also has the added bonus of making every character on the ship rather equal in utility and power. Having a character know something the other doesn't kind of naturally makes one more commanding. Knowledge is power, listen to the Swamp Muppet. He knows what's up. If you don't believe me, try this thought exercise. Imagine being at a car mechanic and them asking if you know what a C-clip under your left wheel is. Do you A, feel powerful, or B, feel like someone who's about to lose $600?
The answer is B.
If Dummy McIntern person was walking around the ship asking questions for the audience, they'd immediately be less useful than everyone around them. Instead, the show values its crewmates quite equally, and it permits them to help one another. And oh, look, they're not fighting, they're playing sports ball together.
Why can't all shows be like this?
Next time you're watching Firefly, pay attention to the flow of information, and notice how every new situation gives different crewmates opportunities to educate the others. For a show that is exceedingly goofy, often glib, and always about 2 seconds away from a sarcastic quip, I have no problem pointing to this as a model of group dynamics. People have this idea that Mickey Mouse took a big risk on giving Avengers, the largest film crossover event at the time, to a relatively unknown Joss Whedon, but it makes a lot of sense to me. New Line Cinema giving Peter Jackson The Lord of the Rings was a huge risk. Giving Sam Raimi Spider-Man was also a gamble. But if I was sitting in a room trying to figure out who could handle the different tones and group dynamics of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk fighting aliens, I'd probably nominate the guy who spearheaded Firefly.
Pretty cunning, don't you think?
So without going into each character individually and explaining why I enjoy them so much, I hope this has all at least helped to explain why I appreciate them together. In part
2, I'd like to focus on the darker stuff, that is, the world of Firefly. Because really, what was this war? Why are they outlaws? Why do people disagree so strongly about the historical implications of the show? And what the heck is going on with these cows in space?
I married me powerful, ugly creature.
How can you say that? How can you shame me in front of new people?